Hi, my name is Kay Cruz. I'm the host of Radio Ventana on radioventana.com. Recently, we invited author Dan Castro to come by our offices in San Antonio and talk with us about his book, Critical Choices That Changed Lives. Here's what he had to share with us.
The book is called Critical Choices That Changed Lives, and the basic motivation for writing it is I've always been fascinated by those people, those rare few people in history that have been able to overcome extreme obstacles. I wanted to know if they were following any kind of a pattern that could help explain their success. So about 10 years ago, I started doing the research, and I literally studied the lives of thousands of people from ancient history to the present who've overcome extreme obstacles. I put the best of the best stories side by side in this book so that other people could read those stories and see the same patterns that I saw. And that's the beauty of the book is, when I say I took the lives of people from ancient history to the present, I'm talking about world history, not American history. So there's people from Africa, Asia, Buddha is in the book. Every continent, every culture, every religion throughout history has had its share of heroes. It doesn't matter what color they are, what gender they are, how old they are, how young they are. They're rare, but despite how rare they are, every culture from every period of history can always point to somebody and say, that's our guy. So there's 17-year-old girls in this book, there's military war heroes, there's superstar athletes, there's musicians, Paganini's in the book, Handel, Beethoven, Billy Joel, because heroes know no boundaries. The adversity that mankind has suffered throughout the years and eventually overcome is universal, and that's the beauty of it. It knows no language barriers, no culture, no ethnic barriers at all. It's the same principles. Not just Americans, but people throughout the world, we love heroes. And if we don't have any, we'll make some up, And part of the problem that we've had in America is we've had 200 years of prosperity. So that these days, the people that our young people look to as heroes are athletes and musicians, Britney Spears, Jessica Simpson, Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, and people like that. And we call them heroes, and in a sense they are, but they're not really heroes in the true historical sense. Those are what I call celebrities. And that's the term we should be using for those people. But because we haven't had any huge struggles in America for a long, long time, we don't have very many people that we can hold up and say, that's my hero. That's why, when the Iraq War happened, Jessica Lynch was touted as such a hero. She didn't do anything but get shot at and put in a hospital. But, the media and especially the government was so excited about putting up somebody that we could call a hero. They found her, and of course, she may be a hero. I'm not going to debate that issue. But there's a lot of other heroes that we have coming out of the Iraq War. Some of them are in this book. Pat Tillman, for example, the NFL professional player that left a multi-million-dollar salary to go and fight and die in Afghanistan. His death was a tragedy because it turns out it was friendly fire, which is very ironic. But nevertheless, it was what was in his heart that we admire, his willingness to sacrifice so much for a cause that he really believed in. And whether you agree or disagree with the Iraq War, you cannot question his motives for what he did. And that's why he's still and always will be a hero. It is the first book I've written. I'll tell you a little story about me. One of the things that I talk about when I speak is how heroes throughout history have identified their passion. There's 4 principal ways that heroes throughout history have identified their passion. And one of the ways is that sometimes they receive a tap on the shoulder. And this happened to me when I was a freshman in high school right here in San Antonio. My freshman English teacher, I'll never forget her, Mrs. Weinstein, she assigned us a 5-paragraph essay to write. 5 paragraphs? Are you out of your mind? To me, it was like writing War and Peace. But nevertheless, I went home and I wrote and I struggled and I scratched out and I threw the papers away and wrote some more. And after a few days, I came up with 5 lousy paragraphs. And I remember turning it in. And a few days later, Mrs. Weinstein stood at the front of the class with her glasses down at the tip of her nose and said, "I have your papers." And she began to pass around the papers face down, mercifully, right? And I remember sitting in the back of the room just shuddering because I knew that my turn was coming. And when she finally got to me, she looked me straight in the eye and said, "You are going to be a writer one day." And I turned around and I said, "Is she talking to me?" And I remember lifting up the paper to see that it had an A+ on it. And I thought, I'm going to be a writer one day. She's the expert. Maybe I'm going to be a writer one day. And I never forgot that. And I went on and I majored in English and ultimately got a law degree, and I've been practicing law about 18 years. But I never forgot that. Maybe I'm going to be a writer one day. So 10 years ago, when it came time, when I had this compelling drive, this passion to find out if there was a pattern that heroes throughout history have followed, that thought stayed with me. That thought gave me the motivation and the courage to keep going, because Mrs. Weinstein said, I'm going to be a writer one day. And now you can go in any bookstore in the country and find this book. It's won several awards. It won the International Latino Book Award. It won the Adding Wisdom Award. It was a finalist for the Book of the Year Award in Washington, D.C. And I'm humbled and I'm honored by these awards. And when I think about it, I look around and I think, Mrs. Weinstein, is that you? I'm going to be a writer one day? Maybe after all these years, I'm finally a writer. You know, Latinos are known for their passion in all kinds of ways. You know, there's the Latin lover thing, there's the Julio Iglesias, you know, passionate love songs. But the one thing that I know from my own roots is that we do everything we do with a passion. Everything, whether it's boxing or singing or romancing, you know, those people that we love. And I think that one of the things that all Latinos should try to do is to take that passion and apply it to their biggest purpose in life, whatever that purpose may be. And how they find that purpose is a whole different question that I can talk about at some other time. But whatever you identify your purpose in life to be, take your God-given passion and apply it 110% to that goal. Find something that's bigger than yourself, something that's bigger than your daily problems and your daily struggles. God gave us this passion for better or for worse. It's a blessing and a curse. But we have a critical choice to make, right? We all have critical choices to make. So let's take what God's given us and turn it into something good and be known throughout the world for how passionately we pursue our objectives and overcome every obstacle that we're faced with. Yeah, I want to tell you a little story that goes along with your question. Speaking of history, there was during the Mexican Revolution in the late 1800s and the early 1900s in Baja, California, Baja, Mexico, actually. There were thousands of families fleeing north into Southern California, refugees to get away from the fighting down there. And there was a little 10-year-old kid named Juan Villaseñor, and his family had traveled for weeks and weeks to get to the closest city where the train station was going to be, and they'd saved for months to be able to afford the train tickets. And while they were there waiting, you know, kids do what kids do. They play, they fight. This one particular kid, Juan, ran foot races with some of his buddies. And on the day that the train finally came, he and some friends decided to play one last game. And the game was chicken. And they wanted to see who would stand behind the train the longest as the train headed down the tracks before he chickened out. There were 5 of them. So when the train started, it went slowly. And after a few seconds, the first kid took off like a shot. And then the train starts going faster. And then 2 more kids took off like a shot. And finally, it's just Juan and his buddy standing there. And now the train's going even faster. And finally, they both looked at each other, looked at the train, looked at each other, looked at the train, then take off after the train. And they ran as fast as they could, and they reached out to try to grab the guardrail, but they couldn't reach it. And they fell in a heap, sweaty and bloody and crying. And Juan lay there on the tracks watching the train disappear in the horizon, and his friend stood up and said, "Why are you crying?" And Juan said, "Are you crazy? There goes your family and my family. We're never going to see them again." And the other kid said, "Well, my cousins live here in town. I'm going to go stay with my cousins." And he left Juan lying on the train tracks. And so Juan stood up and he looked around, and he was barefoot. And he did the only thing that he knew to do, which was to chase that train. And so barefoot with no food and no water in the Baja desert, he ran after that train. And he ran and he bled and he cried and he stopped and he looked at his feet and he wondered if he could go on. And he spent a cold night in the Baja desert, but he kept going. And he learned from his grandfather how to extract water from the juice of the cactus. And that's how he survived. And 24 hours later, he finally came to the next village. And he asked around, and he said, hey, have you seen my family? Have you seen my family? And they said, yeah, they're over there. And he ran. And when his mother saw him, she used the same term of endearment that my mother uses today, which is mijo. Mijo, how did you get here? It's a miracle. It's un milagro. And he just hugged her because he himself did not know how he'd gotten there. And when I thought about that story, I thought, you know, if I had offered Juan a gold medal and said, Juan, what I want you to do is run barefoot through the Baja Desert for 24 hours with no food and no water, would that have been enough motivation? And somehow I think, no, it would not have been. And so my message to the Latino community and to people throughout the world is to find a reason why that's strong enough to get you up off the couch to chase your dream, to overcome your obstacles, because if you don't have a big enough reason why, you're never going to catch that train. And that's what we can learn from Juan Villaseñor.
We'd like to thank Dan Castro for spending a little bit of time with us here on RadioVentana.com. And don't forget to go down to your favorite bookstore or to your favorite online book shopping mart, such as Amazon.com, and look for Critical Choices that change lives. And if it's not at your favorite bookstore, get the manager and request it today. You can find more information on Dan Castro at dancastro.com. Thank you for joining us here at Radio Ventana.